Hello and welcome to today's webinar where myself, Jill Bailey and Helen Sanderson want to share with you how the work's going in developing individual service funds in a care home supporting people living with dementia. Just before we begin, I want to let you know that you can ask any questions during the webinar by typing them into the control panel and sending that. Kerry will then read those out at the end of the webinar. So Helen's going to begin by explaining how we got started, and then I'll share some of the stories and examples of what we've been doing.
Hello. Well, the first thing to do is to describe exactly what an individual service fund is. And as you probably know, an individual service fund is one way that people can use a personal budget. The government's just announced pilots for people introducing direct payments in residential care. So the principles that we're going to be sharing today and the stories are just as applicable there. On your screen now, you can see 6 statements, which are the statements that we're working to in delivering individual service funds. So what we're looking for is a way that people can use their hours or their budget flexibly, and people can choose and direct exactly what they get supported with, where they're supported, whether that's where the person lives or out and about in the community, who the person wants to support them, when, the time of the day that is right for the person to get the support that they want, exactly how, and the person is fully involved in all the decisions about their life. Now, you may be familiar with some of the work that Dementia did in introducing these principles to people with learning disabilities. What we've been doing is taking exactly the same principles and seeing how we can make them work in a residential care home supporting 43 people living with dementia. So this is a photo of the team who've been trying to implement this work, and this is an arrangement between 3 different organisations. Stockport Council, and that in particular the commissioners are involved in this. Borough Care Limited, which is a private organisation supporting people living with dementia, and specifically we're exploring this in Bruce Lodge, and you'll see Jill and I there as well. The first thing we did when we got started was to define what success meant together, and we looked at success from the perspectives of individuals using the service at Bruce Lodge, from the perspective of staff, from the perspective of the organisation Borough Care Limited, and also the perspective of the council as well. So we started, first of all, by defining what success looks like. This is the process that we started with, and again, the same process that we've used in other individual service funds, which has to begin with allocation. Typically, an allocation will be done through a resource allocation process. But what we had to do at Bruce Lodge is really to ask Borough Care how far they could go within existing resources to allocate individual time to each person who lives there. They thought that without any existing resources, and that was a condition of the work that we were doing together, they thought that 2 hours per individual per month was feasible and possible. So that's where we've started from. So Jill's now going to pick up the story of what we did and how we started to make that happen.
So the first thing that we did was use the progress for providers to try and give us a really good idea of where we were at that time. Some real clear, detailed information around what Bruce Lodge would do, what the areas they were doing really well in, and the areas that they wanted to develop further. We also used the Quality of Interaction Schedule, that's an observational audit tool, and the Dementia Care Map. As I say, so that we were really clear about the areas Bruce Lodge was strong in and where the areas that they needed to do further work were. And this gave us also a baseline to really measure the changes that we were making. It has to be said that initially it felt like a step into the unknown, but we knew it had the potential to radically improve the support we provided and change the practice and mindset of staff. So we began working in this way to learn more about how to help people have increased choice and control in their life with Ellen, who you see pictured here. Lisa, who's the manager at Bruce Lodge, and myself sat down with Ellen and the people who knew her best. That was her family and the staff. And she told us that she wanted to get out more and you can see the quote there on the slide. So Ellen had told us what she wanted to spend her time doing, where she wanted to use it, at a time of day that really suited her, and who would support her. And actually choosing the right supporter is arguably one of the most important decisions that will impact on a person's quality of life, because we know that doing something we want to do can still be a really miserable experience if you're not doing it with somebody that you like. So this was quite a task, but Lisa did it, and Ellen went out thoroughly enjoying herself. In terms of allocation, as Helen said earlier, we knew that the best we could do was that each person would have an individual allocation of 2 hours staff time each month. This may not seem a lot, but it was certainly better than what we had before, and really kind of sits with the idea that an inch gained is very much an inch worth living in. So we were making a start. Each person would choose how they want to spend the time, where they want to use it, inside or outside of the home, supported by who they wanted. Next comes the planning stage, so we have conversations with the person, the family, the staff who know the person best. Lisa, the manager, and I have now met with everybody who lives at Bruce Lodge and the people closest to them. So we're proactively working with families to ensure that we're listening well to the contribution that they have to make. Our conversations were around good days and bad days, thinking about if I could, I would. Really looking at framing our conversations so that we could capture rich information. So this is Winifred's one-page profile. We know that personalisation starts with the person. Winifred's a lady who lives at Bruce Lodge. So knowing who the person is, what matters to them, and how they want to be supported is the absolute foundation of personalisation. Without this information, people are more likely to be treated as a clinical condition, and the dementia will always be seen first. So we begin to inform the one-page profiles from the conversations. We cannot deliver personalisation unless we know what matters to the person, the things that will increase well-being, and also how best to support the person. This one-page profile then becomes our job description and helps us ensure that these things are present on a day-to-day basis, and that Winifred's consistently supported in a way that makes sense to her, even if there are lots of different staff involved in a support. So this is also about making sure a person's day-to-day experience is how they want it to be, and of course how a person wants to spend their time, their individual allocation of 2 hours, will reflect from what matters to them as described on the one-page profile. Of course, in order to gather this information, we've got to use the Columbo method, if you like, the TV detective who used to fumble around and have lots of conversations. There's no point in trying to be Sherlock Holmes with his arrogance and knowledge, always believing that he knows what's best. So we listen, we have conversations, and we ask lots of different questions. We know that having time to listen, build good conversation and personal rapport is a real necessary first step if we're to deliver personalised support. And what we learned from Winifred and her family and staff was that she was happiest when she was busy. She'd always been a wonderful homemaker. We'd said key to this process is that the person chooses who supports them, and so Lisa was matching staff with people and planning the rotas around that. This meant that all the staff at Bruce Lodge have developed their one-page profiles, absolutely central to the self-directed support process. So we're matching based on hobbies, interests and personality characteristics, rather than what typically happens in a residential care for elders where a key worker is simply appointed. And this applies to all staff at Bruce Lodge, regardless of their role. Of course, the one-page profile gives us some initial information around how people want to live and be supported, but we have to ask whether these things are present or absent. And we use the working, not working analysis for this. This is Winifred's example here. And we're beginning to capture the things that are working really well for Winifred, and what are the things that are not working so well that we need to do differently. So it's a comparison analysis, if you like. On the one-page profile, we learn what's important to somebody and how they want to be supported, including those things that ensure people are healthy and safe. On what's working, not working, we learn what the current reality is. Are those things present or absent? So this is a really powerful bridge between how people want to live and how they're actually living and being supported. And the function of the working, not working analysis is to create change that really makes life better for people and their family and their friends. The communication chart is another of the person-centered thinking tools, you know, where people don't communicate typically or use few words to speak. The communication chart ensures that we're listening well to people, because unless we listen well, then we're not going to learn the things that are important to people that we need to ensure are present in their lives. This is Beryl's one-page profile. As I said, all the staff at Bruce Lodge, including the housekeepers and maintenance staff and kitchen staff, produce their own one-page profiles. And this exercise allowed the people living with dementia at Bruce Lodge to be matched well with the staff team and to choose who they want to spend their 2 hours a month with based on their interests and what was important to them. So Winifred chose to spend her time with Beryl, the housekeeper, because she said she enjoyed helping out with the daily chores, such as polishing, sweeping, mopping. Winifred's 2 daughters and the staff at Bruce Lodge helped uncover this by sitting down with her, chatting over tea and biscuits, further informing the one-page profile. Again, thinking more about what made good days and bad days, past and present, what was going well and what needed to change, what Winifred had enjoyed in her life in the past, and also what she would do if she could in the future. Winifred's new relationship with Beryl and extra responsibility of taking a real role in looking after her home has had an extraordinary effect on her happiness and well-being. When she lived in her own home, she would routinely clean the house. So before this was actually identified on a one-page profile as being really important to her, a big part of her life and identity had been missing. So Lisa matched Winifred with Beryl, and they've got a wonderful relationship working together. This is Lillian ballroom dancing, who was matched with Mary, because both Mary and Lillian lives at Bruce Lodge. Mary's a staff member there, and because they both have a shared interest in ballroom dancing, thoroughly enjoy it, they go along to the ballroom dance together and really enjoy that time together. John, who's pictured here enjoying half a pint, was matched with Roy. Roy's the handyman at Bruce Lodge, and they were matched because of their shared passion in playing cards. And I think Jim Rummy and poker and several other card games that they're very competitive about and thoroughly enjoy playing together. The thing is that this kind of leads to lots of other things. It's almost like the slogan that you might hear on the TV sometimes, where it talks about, I saw this and thought of you. And Roy had learned from John that he loved classical music, and that had been added to John's one-page profile, that what was really important to him was listening to classical music, especially Mozart. And Roy, when he'd finished work at Bruce Lodge and he'd gone home, and he'd actually gone through all his vast CD collection and pulled out a number of Mozart CDs. And the next day, brought them into Bruce Lodge and asked John if he'd like to listen to them, and John said that he'd love to. So before Roy started his handyman duties, he set John up listening to some Mozart in one of the small lounges, and John had a thoroughly relaxed morning just listening to the music. So what we're seeing is a real shift in culture where this sort of thinking is being embedded into everything that the staff do, really. So that's been a great additional impact, I guess. So the key questions that we need to ask, or the key things that we need to do to put this into practice, is really think about how we can support people to have more choice and control, how people want to live every day, and how people want to use the 2 hours. And as I say, we've matched people to that so that they're doing it with people who also share that interest. The impact for Winifred has been superb, and it's clear to see, I think, from this photograph, it's made a real difference to Winifred's lived experience. And as for many people living with dementia, Winifred has impaired memory and reasoning along with perceptual problems, but nothing gives her more joy than pegging the washing out on the line on a fine breezy day, doing some washing up. This doesn't necessarily cost time or money. It's simply about knowing and acting on it, and it's really given Winifred meaning in her life. Winifred and Beryl work alongside each other, taking a real role in looking after the home that she lives in. Very different to being done to and cared for. This is Winifred folding the laundry, and it's kind of given Winifred increased choice and control over how she lives her life and how she's supported on a day-to-day basis. She can often be found well into the evening, as you can see here, long after the housekeeper's gone home, sitting and folding the laundry. This photograph was taken about 9:30 one night as I was leaving Bruce Lodge. And it's simply become the way she chooses to spend the time, and her happiness is evident for all to see. Not only is her smile lighting up a room, she can be seen beaming all over the home as she reconnects with what she loves most, helping to look after others and bring joy to the people that she lives with. Nothing makes her grin more broadly than pegging the washing out on the line. It's just become the way that Winifred feels a real sense of purpose, I think. So this is Doreen. Doreen was a lady who had been a verger at the local church for many, many years. But once she'd moved into Bruce Lodge, she'd lost contact with her old friends at church. And talking to Doreen and her husband, and using some community maps, really thinking about the things that matter to Doreen and what's in this local area around Bruce Lodge, we realised that the church that Doreen had always been at the centre of was only about a mile away from the home. So we began to think with Doreen and her husband around, would a possibility be that she may enjoy reconnecting with old friends at church? And of course we didn't know until we tried it. But it was absolutely amazing that the enjoyment that Doreen got out of going back to the church, the way that her old friends welcomed her, would sit and chat with her, and you could see Doreen almost come alive. It was as though she'd been somewhat, not depressed, but she'd become very quiet, very introverted. And suddenly she's back amongst the people where she'd had such a valued role, and that seemed to have a real bearing on her well-being. We're kind of working more on this area now. We're looking at how do we really think about this idea of community connecting, and of course the faith community at this church is a great place to try and build on this. So initially it was a staff member supporting Doreen to go to the church, but as Doreen has reconnected with people, people have said, well, we can call for you, we pass where you live, Doreen. So others can now call for Doreen, and she can go up to church with them without that barrier of paid support. And it also means that she can get much more involved in coffee evenings, social afternoons, because we're not having to find staff and release staff to accompany Doreen to the church. And we know that in these times of austerity, there are not going to be more resources, there's not going to be more staff. And so finding natural, non-paid networks, connecting people, ensuring that there's a good relationship and it's working for both people. Volunteers have been developing their own one-page profiles. So again, we've been using the idea of matching, and that's really helping us to support people to do the things that matter to them much more frequently and not requiring paid support, which is super. May and Chris are, again, two people who live at Bruce Lodge. They're using their 2 hours each month to go to the local swimming baths. Not something that you typically see happening in residential services for people living with dementia. The staff members that support them to go to the swimming baths both have a real interest and love of swimming, so it means that the four of them go together and share something that they all enjoy, which is really important. Betty and a daughter and the staff who knew Betty well thought together, and our best guess, because Betty doesn't use any words, so Betty wasn't able to tell us directly how she'd like to use her time. But our best guess was that Betty may enjoy going out to the park, which is quite close to the home, and watching the bowling, the Crown Green bowling, and having an ice cream. If the weather was bad, she might enjoy a pampering session back at Bruce Lodge. So Bessie's another lady who doesn't use words to speak. She's in the later stages of her experience of dementia. And again, our best guess for Bessie was that she would love to have a bath, a pamper evening. Bessie loves to be complimented. She loves to look lovely. So having a manicure and a pedicure. And there's something in there around, you know, well, people should naturally be able to have a lovely soak in the bath. But sometimes what we see is that we become caught up in task-focused cultures. Some of the bathrooms in in residential homes can be very cold, clinical, sterile environments with lots of equipment in. So when the staff were supporting Bessie around this pamper evening, which involved having a long soak in the bath, they'd cover the equipment with throws, they'd put music on, they'd make the bathroom feel much more homely. And the key thing here is that that becomes embedded in the culture, so that actually that becomes typically the way people experience having a bath, if you like, that it's much more about thinking around what matters to each person, what's going to make this a great experience for each person, moving away, as I say, from that real focus on task. So another example here is Mary. Now, Mary is, what Mary had told us was that her Roman Catholic faith was the most important thing in the world to her. And although the Eucharistic minister, the lay preacher, would call at Bruce Lodge and say prayers with Mary and give her the Eucharist, it wasn't the same as actually worshipping at Mass. So again, Mary was matched with a staff member who also attended the local Roman Catholic Church. Mary began to go to Mass, and I think you can see from her beaming smile what a huge difference that's made to Mary. Again, working with that faith community, Mary is connecting with other people at the church. Other people are beginning to call for Mary. It's becoming that non-paid natural network again. We're not having to release staff. The difference to Mary's lived experience is great. The key thing here, I guess, is that our quality of life is absolutely determined by the presence or the absence of those things that are important to us. The main thing that was important to Mary in her life was attending Mass. That was missing. By ensuring that we could address that and support Mary to go to Mass has really improved her quality of life considerably. The other thing, Mary has some issues around 3D vision. She continually thought that she may trip. So Mary's one-page profile under how best to support Mary is very clear about supporting Mary, being able to link somebody when she's out, to try and avoid colour contrasting floorings and door strips, or to reassure Mary when she was crossing a door strip. So all of that key information about what great support looks like to Mary is available to the people that support her to go to Mass who aren't paid. And of course, a staff member would accompany Mary until Mary and the person that she's connected with feel really comfortable in doing that on their own. Joan is a lady who lives at Bruce Lodge. Again, Joan is in the later stage of her experience of dementia. Her husband, Bill, visits every day. They're both in the 90s. They've been married for 67 years. They always celebrate special occasions such as wedding anniversaries, Valentine's Day, by sharing a meal together at Bruce Lodge. Joan now uses very few words to speak, but our very best guess is that Joan would enjoy using her individual 2 hours each month to be supported to go to a restaurant in the town centre where Bill can meet her and they have a meal out together. Bill can't physically support Joan to get in and out of his car himself now, so a taxi and a staff member support Joan to get down to the restaurant in the town centre. So I guess it's about supporting a normal way of living your life that may give somebody a reason for being alive, something that gets us moving away from those care plan boxes that often focus on a person's physical needs without also paying good attention to learning what matters to people. And as I say, how crucial is that given this idea that our quality of life is determined by the presence or absence of those things? Another example that we can share around the individual service fund is, this is Ken. Ken was a professional footballer with Stockport County in the 1950s and 60s, and he now uses his individual time to be supported to go and watch County play all the home matches, supported by a staff member who's also a keen Stockport County fan. And Ken's verdict, it was smashing. And again, this approach has also made a huge difference to Ken's day-to-day life. Until recently, he'd been described and labelled as challenging, but by listening more deeply and more carefully, what the team realised was it was the noise coming from the kitchen that was situated right next to the dining room that Ken ate in. It caused huge distress to him, and the team supporting staff realised that he had noise intolerance. The only time that he was described as challenging was at meal times, and so best support for Ken was to eat in the dining room on the upper floor, well away from the noise of the kitchen. So as well as people being supported to get out and do those ordinary things that we often take for granted, this is also affecting the way they live in their lives on a daily basis. This is the capturing our ongoing listening and learning, because once we've developed the one-page profile, once people are using their individual time, we want to make sure that we're continually listening well to what's working and not working, what are the things that we really want to do more of, what are the things that we need to do differently if it's to work better for people. So this is Winifred's learning log. We're building on the things that are working, looking at what needs to be changed or done differently. Personalisation requires that we go beyond person-centred care to emphasise supporting people living with dementia to have as much choice and control in their lives as possible. And this is absolutely central to the Dementia Declaration and key to the vision for adult health and social care, and a sector-wide partnership agreement, think local, act personal. So did it make a difference, which is the key thing that we need to hear? And what families are telling us is that it certainly made a real difference to the lived experience of the relatives. So Bernie is one of Winifred's daughters, and you can see on the screen what Bernie's impression of the difference it's made for her mum is, that her language has improved tremendously, as well as the fact that Winifred feels as though she's got a real purpose in a day, and that she's not being made to fit in. Winifred's really choosing the way that she lives her life on a daily basis. And Maureen, Winifred's other daughter, talks about what a difference it's made for Winifred in that she feels so useful, that she feels like a real useful member of the community, and things aren't done to her. She's got much more choice in her life, and as I say, you can see from Winifred's smile there that her well-being is really, really good as a result. So that brings us back to the question, I guess, around is personalisation possible in a large care home for people supporting people living with dementia? Yes, with the right people driving it, we believe that it is. Key to this has been the commitment and the enthusiasm of the leadership team, of Lisa, and the staff team at Bruce Lodge. And Ellen, of course, pictured here that we saw earlier, famous for a killer wink. And the real Ellen was the person that we began working in this way with, and it's been tremendous, the changes that we've seen for so many people. So that's the end of our webinar for today. We hope that you've got information that you're going to find useful. Kerry will let us know whether there are any questions as a result.
Thank you, Jill. I have one question for you, and the question is, can any care home do this, and is it very expensive?
That's a very good question. What's been interesting about the work that Jill's done is that I've been supporting the leadership team, and Jill has been working directly with Lisa, the manager at Bruce Lodge, the senior staff there as well, and directly with staff too. We've actually only done 3 half-day training sessions. That was really to get staff started with their own one-page profiles. Most of the effort has been on direct coaching. So can any care home do it? Yes, but what we've noticed is you have to have great leadership. What has made this possible has been the personal commitment of Lisa, the manager, as well as the support that she's had from higher up the organisation. Does it take a lot of training? No, it doesn't. But what it does take is somebody to be there to coach staff into new ways of working, because we know that training can only start that process, and you need somebody there who can coach the staff and the managers to implement this. Thanks, Kerry. Are there any other questions?
Thank you. No, that's all of the questions.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Goodbye.